morning, everybody, and welcome to today's workshop featuring Andrea Greenhouse, President of Vision to Voice. Today's topic is building a resilient and committed team. This workshop is being brought to you by the Ottawa Board of Trade in partnership with our partners at Ottawa Tourism as part of our Workforce Confidence Initiative. This initiative is designed to help build a resilient workforce as we begin to live with COVID and get back to some semblance of normal life. COVID has certainly taken a significant toll on how people feel about working and how they feel about going back to work, whether it's a return to office or if they're in one of our hardest hit sectors like hospitality and tourism. So we want to make sure that employers have tools in order to build a safe and welcoming environment in their place of work to help instill confidence in returning to the office. And so we are very pleased to welcome Andrea today. Thank you so much. Andrea, would you like to take over now?
Sure, I will. I'm going to share my screen.
Super.
I have a presentation today to kind of help us all along. A lot of us are visual learners, so that helps instead of me just blabbing away. So there we go. Yeah, so today we're talking about building a resilient and committed workforce. And the first part we're going to talk about I'm going to introduce myself and tell you a little bit about my experience, tell you my story. We're going to talk about human motivation because at the end of the day, that's really what every owner and business leader really needs to understand is what motivates and what matters to people. Then we're going to talk about communication with people and how that shapes the employee experience and how that can build resilience and help with motivation and understanding. And then we'll have a little talk, discuss what you've learned, and also you can share questions and concerns. And then the second part, we're going to talk about psychological safety, burnout and boundaries, and mental health, and gratitude and celebration. Then we're going to spend some time putting that into practice, or talking about how we put it into practice. So me, I've owned my business for over 21 years. I started out my career on Parliament Hill, and then I transitioned to corporate communications role. And in that role, I worked for a really amazing organization that had a fantastic culture. And it was way ahead of its time. This was over 21 years ago. And when I started my business, I felt like I wanted to reproduce that. So I began working as a solo practitioner, advising organizations through change. I worked on some of the Government of Canada's biggest change initiatives. I also worked for private sector organizations, helping them improve internal communications and helping them navigate change. And in the last 5 years, my business has considerably expanded. We work with companies across North America, making sure that they get internal communications right, helping through change. And I'm doing some teaching and that kind of thing as well. So that's me. I was just named one of the top 10 influencers in my field in the world, which was kind of exciting. And I am recognized as a thought leader. I do a lot of writing and research as well. So let's talk about human motivation. There's certain things that drive human beings that have been part of our DNA since we were cavemen. Things like our flight and fight response, our response to things that are new, our response to uncertainty. These have all been shaped by our need to survive in the world. And we still have these needs today. So there's a lot of literature out there, and I've boiled down what I think are the main sources of human motivation. And the first one is really around purpose. And every piece of literature talks about how purpose, which is a sense of meaning, is important for employees. During the pandemic, the companies that thrived were the ones with a strong sense of purpose. Everyone wants to get up in the morning and have whatever they're doing make a difference. There's also been studies that of survivors of say concentration camps and things like that. The reason that they've survived is that they've had a strong sense of purpose. So purpose is absolutely essential in organizations. And we've done work where we've gone into large, sophisticated organizations and not one person could articulate the organization's purpose. So having a purpose is very important in your organization. A sense of mastery is also important. We all want to get up in the morning and do a good job. We want to be able to, I give people the generosity that they are coming from a good place, and everybody wants to do a good job. They want to be able to have the skills to master their work. Humans are also wired to learn and grow. The reason we survive on this planet is because we learn and adapt. And as the environment changes, and this is not just relevant today, but it was relevant when when we were surviving as hunters and gatherers. As things change, we learned and we adapted. So learning and growing is part of who we are as humans. Social connection is also critical. We are a social species. We need to belong, and we need that connection. Even the most introverted people need to have a connection to others. That's how, again, how we flourished as a species is because we work together and we have families and societies and or teams. So connection is critical, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that later on. Uncertainty kills us. It causes so much stress. We need certainty in our lives. And one of the things that's been so painful about the pandemic is the uncertainty. When's it going to end? What are things going to look like? All that uncertainty causes stress, which is not good for resilience. Belonging in these social groups, we need to feel like we matter. We need to feel like we're a part of that group and that we're welcome. Trust and respect are also critical. You can't have an organization that works, or even a relationship that works well, without trust and without respecting each other. And the last thing people need, and this is one of the reasons why hybrid work is becoming increasingly a priority for people, is to have agency and empowerment. People want control over their work. They want to be able to make decisions about how, when, and where they do their job. They want even small amounts of control over your work can make a huge difference in employee satisfaction. So I've taken these drivers of human motivation and I've thought about them for a long time. And I've also understood in my work what communication needs to happen in order to satisfy those drivers of human motivation. And I came up with a formula, which I call inform, involve, and inspire. And each one of those words stands for a type of communication that's necessary in this framework in order to fill those human motivational factors. And I'm going to explain them now. And a lot of this comes from the work that I've done in organizations and the problems that I've seen, and then I've thought about the problems and I thought, okay, those problems exist because, and the first one is because people aren't informed. So a lot of times people aren't equipped with the information they need to do their jobs. In fact, employees spend up to 17 hours a week, which is almost half of the week, looking for information. And we live in an economy in a world where a lot of people are information workers. And if they don't have the information to do their jobs, it makes them highly unproductive. So communication normally in organizations is viewed as sending out the news. It's an announcement. But what people forget is that people need information that they can use. And there's knowledge in your organization that you need to harness and share so that other people aren't solving the same problems over and over again. This can be content related to problem solving, related to procedures, related to how people need to think, feel, and act. It can even be content around where the heck do I hang up my coat? I've been in an organization where there's no information about what I do with my stuff when I'm hoteling. And I actually got my stuff locked up and put away because there was no information anywhere. No one had that, those details, and I put it in the wrong place. And I spent a whole day trying to track down my shoes and my laptop. And that's a big waste of time. When people aren't informed, there's an array of problems. There's 500 interpretations of how to do things. And when you have new people join your organization, they're searching for how do I do things around here? What are the processes? How do I solve this problem? It can also lead to an inconsistent customer experience. If we're not all following the same processes, then everybody gets a different customer experience. Managers are always overwhelmed. They've got their people to manage and they've got their own jobs to do to a certain extent. And they get overwhelmed with questions because no one knows how to get the information they need. People waste time, and that incredible knowledge that you've built up in your organization is lost. The second one, this is the one that is always missing. We do internal communications audits in organizations, and we always see gaps in involving employees. You've spent all kinds of time looking for incredibly talented people, but then if you don't give them a voice or a say in what's going on, you don't involve them in decisions, you don't ask for their input, that smarts, that expertise, that new perspective is lost. So involving employees really is about harnessing the brain power of the people that you have. Leaders do not have all the answers. It gives people agency over their work, that control that people want. It also demonstrates respect. When you ask me what I think, that's a sign of respect. What you think matters to me, and it's important. And it also builds trust. One of the biggest things I've seen is that change is always done to people instead of with people. And I feel that if you involve people, then it's a really powerful way of making change happen. The change goes much more smoothly. There's fewer barriers to change, less resistance, and more resilience. So one of the first things that you need to do to involve employees is to make sure that there's psychological safety. You can ask people for their input, but if there's no psychological safety, people will not speak up. And we'll be talking about what psychological safety is and how to build it a little later on. So yeah, when people aren't involved, they don't feel empowered and they lack autonomy. So it's a horrible thing to not have control over what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. It can really demoralize people, and it's one of the biggest causes of people leaving their organization because nobody listens to me and I don't have control. There's increased certainty because I understand what's going on and why, and I have a chance to ask questions, and I'm not feeling like I'm in the dark. People feel victimized, and they they also don't have a chance of saying, well, hey, you're changing this, but have you thought about how it's going to impact the customer experience over here? And I've seen that in organizations where changes have been pushed down from senior leaders and people have concerns that aren't listened to. They're just dismissed. And that all triggers a huge stress response, which is not healthy in organizations or even for people. The last one is inspire. I don't know why I put this last, because I talked about purpose at the very beginning about how important that is, but inspire is really around helping people understand what the purpose of the organization is. People now, especially young people, they want to work where they are making a difference. And so researchers are saying that purpose is the new competitive advantage. So people want to work in places where their values are aligned with their organization's values. They want to get up in the morning and know that they're making a difference in the world, whether they're solving climate change or contributing to world peace, or maybe even just making people's day better, their holidays better, their evening nicer because they're going out to a beautiful restaurant, or maybe it's the satisfaction of knowing that for people in the financial world, that my wealth is protected, or the hard work that I've done to build up some savings is going to be protected. So yeah, purpose and inspiring people fulfills that deep need for fulfillment in terms of what am I doing with my day and why does it matter? And it also aligns people, and alignment is one of those words that I feel is overused now, but it's what are we doing as an organization, and let's have that clear objective and clear idea of why we're here so we can all row in the same direction. It's really about making sure that everybody's clear on those goals and why those goals matter. Purpose organizations or purpose-oriented organizations outperform their competitors on every indicator. This gives you an example of how important it really is. And 82% of employees say it's important to have a clear purpose. I think the number 61% of employees select an employer based on their values. If their values are not aligned with their employers, it's a deal breaker. So it just goes to show how important inspiring your employees is. And I also feel like every organization has a purpose. It just has to be discovered and articulated, and it has to be authentic. Like a lot of organizations come up with a purpose that's not really that authentic. It has to be real. It has to resonate with people, and it doesn't have to be fancy. You know, I once worked with the company that cleans my carpets to talk about like what is the purpose of your organization, and because they make a difference every day by making people's houses more beautiful, keeping their carpets, which is one of the biggest investments in your house, keeping your carpets clean and healthy. When people aren't inspired, they lack the motivation and energy, and they can also work hard but not get anywhere. That's the lack of alignment. Decisions don't make sense. If an organization has a clear purpose, a clear direction, and they explain decisions and how they relate to that direction, then they start to make sense. Shopify is a great example of a company that always keeps its purpose front and center, especially when they're communicating with their employees. Their decision to go digital by default was communicated in a way that was aligned with their purpose. They are a digital organization. They had their mission to help, you know, companies sell their products online is in a digital space. They felt they aligned that decision to their purpose. Change fatigue is like when people can't see why the decisions are made, don't understand the direction they're going, change fatigue starts to happen and resilience is non-existent. Now I'm going to talk to you about some principles for communication. So what I just explained were kind of the buckets of communication, the types of communication you need to develop in your organization to make sure people are informed, involved, and inspire and meet all those needs of people, those psychological and neurobiological human needs. Now I'm going to talk to you about some principles. And whenever you communicate, you need to keep these principles in mind for effective communication. So the first thing is taking a strategic approach. And I could probably do a workshop just on this, but it's really about being clear on what you're trying to achieve. You're not communicating just for communication's sake. You need to be very clear on how you want people to think, feel, and act. So any business that has even one employee should be clear on what they're communicating, when and why, and what they're trying to achieve. And what we often do as an organization is we develop strategies that help build the organization's brand. So if you're a Starbucks, for example, or a hotel, what are the things that your employees need? Like, what is the customer experience that you're trying to deliver? Is it friendly? Is it fun? Is it professional? Is it luxury? What is it? And how do you deliver that experience through your employees? What are the things that they need to do? What are the things that they need to feel? And how do they act in terms of delivering that brand? So every communication, whether it's a staff meeting or a major announcement or a town hall, needs to have, then you need to have a plan and a strategic approach. Communication early and often. You need to be communicating as much as possible, at least once a week. And even if you don't have all the answers, there's people default and say, well, I don't know the whole story, so I'm not gonna bother people just yet. And what happens is this creates a vacuum where people they make up stories. And one of the things about our brains is we have a negativity bias. So we assume the worst. And if you're not communicating, people are going to assume the worst and the rumor mill is going to start. So communicating often with your employees, touching base with them. It doesn't matter if you're a 5-person organization or a 10,000 person organization. You should always be communicating, letting people know how things are going, listening to them, making sure they have the information they need to do their jobs. And one of the critical things, again, something I don't see in a lot of organizations, is using your managers as a conduit or a partner in your communication ecosystem. So communication usually either happens from the CEO or from the internal communications department or the marketing team, but managers are often left in the dark, and managers are the sense makers in organizations. They should be equipped with information to talk to their teams. What does this mean for our team? Do you have any questions? That kind of thing. So a lot of what we do is we help organizations equip their managers with the skills and the tools they need to communicate with people. I I have a little tip in here. Always watch your tone. The tone in your communication, whether it's professional, fun, friendly, that triggers emotion, and it can, the tone. You often hear people saying, "Oh, that message from the CEO was tone deaf." Well, tone reflects, can be caring and human, and that's a really critical thing to have in your communication. One of the things I pride myself is developing more human communication. So making sure that your communication is not stiff and the tone is appropriate is very important. Okay, here's principles 3 through 6. So authentic and transparent. When you communicate like you're hiding something, or you're not giving people the full story, it destroys trust. People want to know the truth, and so being authentic and transparent is critical. Words and tone matter. I just went through that. I guess I should have had that on the other slide. Listening is really important, to harness the ideas of your smart people. And storytelling, here's a really important one. I'm going to spend some time on this because we don't do this enough. Stories are 22 times more memorable than facts. And we often say, okay, our people are very analytical. They need facts, they need data to make decisions. But stories make sense of the data. And stories are a lot more powerful. They, when scientists look at people's brains that are being told a story versus being brains that are being told a fact, the brains that are being told a story light up in so many more ways. And that's why they're more memorable. They also are almost like, I heard it described once, I love this idea of a flight simulator for our brain. When we're being told a story, we're imagining ourselves in that story. So telling stories in your organization is a really powerful way of getting your message across, whether it's a story about your purpose, making your purpose come to life through a story. That can be so powerful for people. And that story, like the stories in some cultures that are passed down from generation to generation, can be passed down from people, like team to team, through your organization. I remember when I worked with one organization, there was a story about the founder of the organization, a brave act that he committed. And that story, every person in that story or in that organization, even 50 years later, could recount that story with a huge amount of accuracy. And it was a story that talked about, that demonstrated the values in the organization. So communication is never done. It's never over. Well, people forget. People aren't listening. People don't show up to meetings. People miss the memo. So it's not a set it and forget it exercise. It's not a one and done activity. Communication needs to be ongoing. I think the stat is people need to hear a message 3 times before it actually sinks in. But there's this assumption that you communicate once and then you don't need to communicate again. And that's not true. It needs to be an ongoing activity. People need to hear messages in different ways through different channels. So that's important. The other thing is, I guess this celebrate wins is really around change, but a lot of the time you'll have an organizational announcement about a new initiative, and there's all kinds of effort around this new initiative or new project. But what happens when it's complete is nobody stops to talk about how successful it was, or what the issues were, or what you've learned in that project. So one of the things that always needs to happen is that you reflect and on the wins, and you celebrate the achievements is really important. And taking time to appreciate what you've accomplished is also important, instead of going on to the next thing. The other thing is, then this is something that we're doing right now with a lot of office reopening, is understanding that you're not going to get everything right the first time, and you use those listening systems and understanding what's going on with your employees to make sure that you change and adjust and course correct. For example, we know we're not going to get hybrid right out of the gate. There's going to be things that we need to adjust. Maybe you've said everybody needs to come in on Friday, and that's not going to work for people. In 6 months, it's not working. So helping people understand that there can be adjustments, and that you need to listen and learn is a really important thing. And that gets me to my last principle, which is building your change muscle. And this is around building that learning and growth mindset in your organization. So I talked about this at the beginning, about how people are wired to learn and grow. And so one of the things we do with organizations is help them build that learning and growth mindset. And that is in part by listening to each other, but also using our framework, the Inform, Involve, Inspire framework helps to build that. It helps provide people with the information, the purpose, and involves them so that they can learn and grow. Psychological safety, making sure people have a voice and feel safe, is also important. And empowering people to make decisions and doubling down on that purpose really helps to build the change muscle. So I've worked on a number of change initiatives, as I said at the beginning, with large government organizations and even private sector. And if I had a 5 cents for every leader that said, my people are tired of change, and they are change resistant, but change is never going to go away. So we need to make sure that our organizations are built for change, that they're ready for change, that they embrace change. And I think that communication, following the framework that I have and following those principles, can really build a change ready organization. So I see we have somebody new who just joined us. Thank you. Hello. And now I think it's time to chat. Let's use 5 minutes to talk, like what you learned, what resonated with you, what you think in your organization's working or not working. Or questions you have for me.
Andrea, I have a question for you relating to purpose. I guess what I want to know is about multi-layered purposes. So I'm thinking specifically of an instance where somebody is running a restaurant and they sell hamburgers. And maybe their purpose is to deliver the best hamburger that person has eaten all day long. And that's why everyone gets out of bed and goes to work in the morning, because they want to put their heart and soul into that hamburger. But how important is it to build a higher level purpose into your communication? So for example, they're going to be serving a lot of tourists. Is it a good idea to build in how important the tourist economy is to Ottawa's overall picture? Or is that too much information? Should it be distilled down into something much simpler? Just curious on your thoughts about that.
Sure. A lot of organizations have their primary business purpose, and they also have a social purpose. So whether it's we give back to our community, we're helping to fight climate change, or contributing to the tourism economy, or whatever it is. Some organizations have two. They have this social purpose, which kind of sits beside their main purpose of an organization. What's even more powerful is if you can marry the two. It's not always possible, but it can. But that I would put that as your social purpose, and a lot of organizations are articulating that as well.
So, if I understand all of this great information correctly, you could marry the two together by creating a story
Yes.
around not just serving that best hamburger that tourist has ever eaten in their entire life, but how that contributed overall to the economic growth of the city from that one magical hamburger, which we'd all love
Yeah.
to eat. Using a story of some kind to sort of reinforce both the business purpose and that greater social purpose.
Yeah, like maybe there's somebody who comes back every year to Ottawa just to have one of those hamburgers, right? And it's you talked about this person who comes, drives with his family or whatever it is. But yes, that's exactly. Another a good example is again when I was working with it was Nordion that I worked with many years ago, and Nordion makes radioisotopes. And it's basically like the Intel inside. The radioisotope goes into a pharmaceutical that goes to a hospital to treat a patient. So we were very far removed from the patients that were actually using the products that we were producing. But one day, I was in charge of media relations and looking at the news. And one day, I noticed that one of our Ottawa Olympic rowers was diagnosed with Graves' disease. And Graves' disease is treated with radioactive iodine, which was a product that Nordion made. So we contacted her and we invited her to come and talk to our town hall. And we had her back 3 times before she was treated, after the treatment was successful, and then when she won, I think it was 4 Olympic medals. And there's a really great example of bringing your purpose to life, connecting people through a shared story that can live in the company forever, right? So yeah, exactly. We were saying there was a great example of connecting people to the lives that we were saving, and the fact that those people were doing amazing things with their lives because of what we were doing.
And that is a great story.
It is.
That's
Anyone else have
outstanding.
any questions or thoughts or feel like they're doing a good job or a bad job? We're kind of running a little bit behind, so maybe I'll just jump right into the next section.
And before you do, Andrea, I just want to remind our guests that Andrea is more than happy to answer your questions after the fact. There's a ton of information being shared with you today. And sometimes it's not easy to think of, your questions or your golden nuggets that you want to discuss further. So you will be able to reach out to Andrea after the fact as well.
Yeah, and you'll be getting a workbook with some additional resources and information. So I want to talk to you about psychological safety. Psychological safety is the belief that you won't be punished or humiliated for speaking up with questions, concerns, or mistakes. And I am a fearless organization practitioner. I've been certified in using some methods developed by a professor out of Harvard University named Amy Edmondson, who was just named the #1 management thinker on the planet, because of the importance of psychological safety in organizations. It's been identified as the #1 factor in successful teams and the #1 contributor to a great culture. So this is pretty important. Amy discovered psychological safety by accident. She was doing a PhD student, and she was doing a study of successful teams in hospitals. And her thesis was the most successful teams made the least number of mistakes. And as we know, mistakes in hospitals can be deadly. When she got the data back, she was dumbfounded. The data said that the most successful teams were making the most mistakes, and she couldn't figure it out. So she went back, did a bunch more research, and what she found was it wasn't that the teams that were most successful were making the most mistakes, it was that they were talking about it. And this was actually what was making them successful, is because they were open and they openly shared their mistakes, they talked about them, and they learned from them. So psychological safety, then like fast forward about 15 years later, and Google has a lot of money, really progressive company. They wanted to study, they wanted to understand the secret sauce behind their most successful teams. Was it some kind of combination of skills, personalities? What was it? So they studied, I think it was 280 some teams over a period of 5 years. And again, the results astounded them. It wasn't any combination of skills or personalities at all. What it was psychological safety. No matter, every team that was successful had psychological safety as an underpinning in the team culture. So psychological safety is not about being nice. In fact, open conversations require a degree of candor where you need to say what's on your mind. I know many of us were taught, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. In a psychologically safe culture, that rule is canceled. You need to be able to speak openly. It's not about unconditional praise or support. In fact, it's the opposite. I've seen a lot of groupthink in organizations. Everybody gets on the bandwagon and goes in one direction. And if anyone has any questions or doubts or concerns about that direction, they do not speak up. And so that bandwagon mentality, or that unquestioning mentality, again, is canceled. And it's not about an anything goes environment. There's still high standards. There's, failure is a learning opportunity. It's not about trying to fail just for failure's sake. It's about, let's do the best that we possibly can. There's a level of accountability. And it's not about being comfortable either. It's about, in fact, being uncomfortable and pushing yourselves and always questioning and always being open and honest with each other. So this gets back to that flight or fight response again. When we are in that flight or fight response, our brains don't work like we need them to work. Today, we need our analytical thinking. We need deep thinking. We need collaboration. And if there's a lack of psychological safety, our brain is hijacked and we can't use the thinking that we need to solve the problems that we need to solve. So psychological safety allows our brains to work in the ways that they need to work. I love this quote: nobody gets a great idea when they're being chased by a tiger, which is true. If you can imagine yourself running away from a tiger, you're not thinking about how to solve some of the toughest problems at work, right? And psychological safety is even more important today because we work as part of a team. We don't work on assembly lines, doing things on our own, where our work is highly interdependent. And we need that open conversation and that collaboration and that safe space to work together effectively. There's 4 dimensions of psychological safety. And I have this ability to go into teams and measure psychological safety and help them build more of it. And I measure, the tool that I use measures psychological safety on 4 dimensions. One of them is attitude towards risk and failures. Is it safe on this team to make a mistake? Willingness to help each other. Sometimes willingness to help means willingness to ask for help. And a lot of us, we're the heroes. We want to do everything ourselves. We don't want to seem vulnerable or incompetent, so we won't ask for help. I've got this, And when you're overwhelmed with work, you just put your head down, you ignore all your colleagues, and you just go for it. In a psychologically safe organization, people are willing to help each other and people are willing to ask for help. Open conversations, you can have difficult conversations, you can ask tough questions, you can question the status quo or address the elephant in the room. And it's actually welcome. And inclusion and diversity, we all have different ways of thinking about things. And so in a psychologically safe environment, people feel welcome for who they are and their opinions matter. I love this quote. Lynn and I were talking about perfectionism yesterday. I was going to tell her this quote and I'm like, no, I'm going to save it. So we talk about the fact that perfectionism, which is the fear of making mistakes, the fear of saying I need help, the fear of looking stupid in a room because I've asked a dumb question when there are no dumb questions. And so I love this quote by Brené Brown. Perfectionism is a 20-ton shield that we lug around thinking it will protect us, when in fact it's the thinking that prevents us from being seen and taking flight. And really, psychological safety is taking away that 20-ton shield that allows us to think differently, question things, feel really safe to work in new ways in our teams. So Lynn and I were talking about this yesterday too. It's like, oh, this sounds great. What do I do? It sounds really hard. And Amy Edmondson, this researcher whose tools and methods I use, I've met her once. She says it's built really in small moments, and it's ongoing small moments that matter and that can build psychological safety. And the first thing, but there's sort of 3 steps to doing it. The first thing is really, you need to start thinking differently about what it means to fail and the importance of different perspectives. And leaders particularly think, I'm a leader, I need all the answers. I gotta have all the answers. But leaders need to be articulate that they don't have all the answers, that they're not perfect. They need that humility, that vulnerability, and they need to stress how important people's different perspectives are. And what happens if I don't hear all the perspectives? When I was doing one of these scans, the CEO actually said, I'm afraid of what I'm not hearing. And it matters to me to know what people are really thinking. The second one is really to ask good questions. And you'll see in your workbooks that I have a list of questions that help build psychological safety. It's really just changing the questions at the end of your meeting, or even asking different questions, asking good questions and listening. And then the last one is thanking people, demonstrating how important this is by thanking them and acknowledging them. And this is not fancy, and it doesn't take a lot of work, doesn't take a huge culture shift to do this. It's just very small things that will build this really important element in your organization and in your teams. I'm skipping ahead pretty quickly. Burnout. This is something I'm really passionate about, because I think the whole burnout epidemic is really, really sad. And burnout is not about having too much work, or it's not all about having too much work. So people who are burning out are going to look for another job. 80% of people feel like they're feeling some aspects of burnout at some of the time, and they're going to be sick. And burnout affects high performers. It doesn't affect it. And so those people that are really important in your organization are more likely to burn out than the people who are not high performers. So there's a lot of research around what's causing burnout, but there's also a lot of misconceptions. So it is about an unsustainable workload, but it's about so much more. And actually, when the other day when I met Amy, she was saying psychological safety or a lack of psychological safety is a huge contributor to burnout. But part of that is that perceived lack of control. If I don't have a voice, if I don't have control and people are just downloading work and I don't have a safety valve or I don't have a say about my work, that is going to contribute to burnout. A lack of reward or recognition. So, and rewards can be intrinsic rewards as well. And there's information in your workbooks about that too. Intrinsic reward is it's meaningful to me. Extrinsic is I get a gold watch after 5 years. It's like, it's the, the perks. And intrinsic rewards are so much more powerful. So when you think about purpose, purpose can help with burnout because it's an intrinsic reward. The lack of supportive community. So if I don't have support in my organization, if I don't have that connection, that social connection, a lack of fairness and mismatched values and skills all contribute to burnout. I'm going to skip that because it's just a quote from me, but I really believe that you can't just use up your human resources, that you have to support them in a way that they continue. They're not a resource, that they're a source. So addressing burnout, psychological safety, listening, communicating with openness and transparency, that giving people that certainty, that understanding of what's going on, and making work meaningful and rewarding is also really important too. The role of gratitude and celebration. I had a client come to me I guess it was right around Christmas, and he said he's a global director of internal communications for an 8,000 employee organization, and he said, we've just lost our spark. And so I did a bunch of research, and what I realized was there was two things missing, and they were gratitude and celebration. And I actually saw some research that confirmed my research the other day, that people in organizations that aren't celebrating are highly likely to leave. So gratitude, even if you're like not a yogi like me, being thankful and expressing gratitude has powerful impacts on our brain and our teams. It can increase resilience and empathy, lower stress hormones. And it's not about saying thank you, thank you for finishing that report, or thank you for whatever. It's thank you for being you. That's gratitude. It's thanking people for being who they are and not for what they've done. And a culture of gratitude, and it's a verb, an attitude of gratitude. It leads to deeper connection, higher job satisfaction, stronger teams, and it helps with resilience. So practicing gratitude in your organization can be extremely powerful and really important. And again, it's a small thing. It's taking the time to be grateful for one another. And it's going to cost you $0. And it's going to make people happier in their work. So my suggestions, nurturing an attitude of gratitude. It's an action. You need to be sincere, and it needs to be spontaneous, and you need to value people for who they are. So pretty simple stuff, really. The second thing is celebration, and there's I'm actually going to share it with you guys as well. It's a recent study by MIT Sloan, so celebration highlights and reinforces behavior. It deepens that social connection. One of the things we're missing in remote work is those deep social connections with people. And so celebration gives people the time and allows people to connect on a deeper level. It recharges and energizes people, and it gives people some positive emotions. And celebration and connection can be built in small ways in your toolkits. There's a whole pile of ideas for remote, hybrid, and in-person connection activities. Celebrations, you should add play. And I'm a person who grew up in a family where there wasn't a lot of playing going on, and I'm not a person who likes to play. But when I started doing the research, I found out that adults need to play. It's really good for our brains, and it makes us vulnerable, and that deepens connections. So adding an element of play is important, and encouraging people to participate is pretty important. It can really, I don't know, last time you did something goofy and played a game, like, can you remember how amazing it felt? And so doing that with your team is really important. Making it inclusive. Not everybody, everybody's different. So making sure you meet people where they're at. I actually saw a story where some company is being sued for having a birthday party for somebody because he said, I didn't want it. He had suffered from anxiety, and they went ahead and did it anyways. And it caused him all kinds of grief and anxiety and stress. So making sure that when you're planning these things, you're including everybody's needs, wants, and abilities, and making sure that that you're sensitive to those things is really important. Aligning it with your purpose and your values. Again, a really great opportunity to reinforce your purpose, celebrate your values, and just get creative. It doesn't have to, or not, it doesn't have to be fancy, right? It can just be, let's have cocktails at 5, or let's do something different on Monday morning, and to celebrate a successful week last week. Yeah, I'm running out of time, but good news. I'm done. So what did everyone think? Is that valuable? Did they learn something new?
Well, Andrea, we had chatted yesterday about how much I had been looking forward to this, and I'm just going to say that I learned a lot. One of the things that I'd like to ask a question. How do you do a good job celebrating when your business operates on we're open at 7 a.m. in the morning till 2 a.m. in the morning? Like, how do you celebrate with your team when you're in a restaurant environment or a hotel environment where staff is on duty 24 hours a day? Do you have any suggestions about a way to do that in an inclusive manner?
Well, I guess you have to get creative. But I'm also thinking, hey, you're in the hospitality business. You should be able to come up with something, right? And maybe it's like, I know some organizations will do it in different pockets, but also, what about shutting down the restaurant early for a team event, or having a sign up saying we're at reduced staff capacity because we're taking care of our team. Like, people will respect that, and people will actually, in my view, if I was a customer, I would love to see that these people who are working so hard are having the opportunity to kick back and celebrate and connect with their teammates. So I think it's a question of prioritizing, and I think it should be made a priority. And if you're thinking about your values as an organization, if you value your team and your people, then you're going to find a way to put them first. That's my answer. It's kind of a tough answer you might not want to hear, but I think that's what needs to be done.
And what do you think? I'm sure people watching today's workshop are going to think, wow, so many great ideas, but where do I start? What would be your single biggest piece of advice about how to implement this kind of culture and environment in a place of business? What would be the first thing that just about everybody should start doing?
I would say psychological safety. is super easy, right? 3 easy steps, just changing a few things in your organization to start building that psychological safety. I think that would be the first step. The psychological safety is that underpinning. Some people say it's the soil, not the seed. It's creating that healthy ecosystem in your organization. For example, if you have psychological safety and you're planning a celebration event, people are going to come forward with ideas, questions, and concerns. They're going to help out. They're going to feel like they belong. So I really believe that would be the most essential thing, and I feel it's the easiest thing too.
I think I think that maybe the formal term of developing psychological safety might be intimidating for people, but you really do make it seem easy.
Um, so the term that we use, well, in Amy's book is called the fearless organization. So it's really making organizations fearless, which I love. Like I love that word. And psychological safety is also it's Canada has this psychological health and safety, which is kind of confusing, but I like the idea of a fearless organization. So building a fearless organization is a good term.
I like that too, a lot. I don't know what it is. There's something about that phrase that instills a sense of camaraderie, team orientation. I prefer that to the psychological safety, so I'm really glad that you offered that as an alternative way to think of it.
Yeah.
So I'm just noticing our time. We've gone a little bit over. We had mentioned at the top of the workshop that Andrea had a ton of content to share with us today. So I just want to remind everybody that we have recorded today's workshop. It is going to be available online within hours, and we'll send out a link for everyone because I'm sure there are things that you're going to want to go back and review. Andrea has also graciously offered to share her slides with everyone that's attending, and we have a workbook for you to take back into your place of work and do some reflection and figure out how you want to adopt some of these practices to make your organization or your business a fearless organization and business. So Andrea, thank you so much. I think this is exactly the kind of information that business owners and organization leaders need in today's environment. And very grateful for all these great tips and advice that you've offered. And thank you all for joining us today, taking an hour out of your busy day to listen to what Andrea had to offer. So on that note, I'd like to wish you all a lovely day and thank you. And you'll get an email from me soon with all of the follow-up materials from today. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.